Hey, everybody. It is great to see everybody here. We have an awesome show coming up today because I've got the amazing Gene Petrino here. And before I bring Gene up, I want to go over a few things, touch base on some things that are going on. And I figure the first thing I will do is here is the very first published copy of Search for the Armor of God. I just unwrapped it this morning. It showed up last night, but I wasn't ready to do my unwrapping video, so I did it this morning. And then I also wanted to touch base on, everybody's kind of seen me talking about moving beyond boxes, the importance of being our authentic selves. And this is something that I do talk about for business, for companies, because I am able to see how business views the bottom line, yet the importance of well-being, of how everybody is doing and not covering themselves, actually affects that bottom line. And I've realized as I've been talking with people, so many of them are like, "Oh, we'll do this next year. We're planning on starting doing whatever it is after the first of the year." And the reality is, when you are making your plans for next year, no matter what it is, personal, business, whatever it is, one of the most important things you can think of, understand, this is a race, and January 1st may be your starting line, but there is no reason that you cannot have a running start. This is not your track and field race where everybody lines up equally. Those who are going to get a jump on the year, those who are going to take the opportunity of these next 2 months to start stuff, do stuff, create stuff, they're the ones that are going to have the head start and be ready to dive into the next year. So with that, I'm about to bring up Gene, and I want to read his bio for you first. Gene Petrino is a distinguished security expert with over 3 decades of exemplary law enforcement and private security service, including a notable tenure as a SWAT Commander. With an enduring commitment to community safety, his unparalleled insights into active shooter response and prevention have solidified him as an industry leader. Recognized for his acumen in workplace violence and crisis management, Gene's expertise is sought by organizations seeking to enhance their preparedness. His legacy extends beyond operational achievements. It encompasses a dedication to sharing wisdom and empowering others. Notably, Gene led a SWAT team during the Fort Lauderdale Airport active shooter incident, imbuing his guidance with real-world experience. Gene Petrino doesn't just provide security, he enriches knowledge, leaving an enduring legacy for all. And now I want to bring up Gene. Hey, Gene. It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
So you've got a lot of experience with this, and I think one of the best places to start when people are kind of starting to get to know you is, how did you get here? What took you on a path to doing this as a consultant?
Wow. Long stories and short stories. I'll give you the medium story. So I didn't plan on going into law enforcement as a kid, had no desire, never. If you asked me when I was 17, I'd be like, there's no chance. But through an experience in college where we had a serial killer, I first saw law enforcement, the good side, what I perceived to be a good side. And I saw the camaraderie. I saw how they were really trying to make the community feel safe. And that really kind of stuck with me. A few years later, I switched schools and ended up meeting through an elective course, Introduction to Criminology, one of the investigators for that investigation. And that just opened up the world of possibilities for me. Of course, the course also had a SWAT team that came and did a demo, and I was like, that's something I want to do. And so my life had pretty much been changed at that point. Fast forward throughout my career, ups and downs, like I think everybody has in any career. But about about halfway through, I kind of reinvented myself and my job and found my passion again for trying to help people out. And that again, change in attitude changed everything for me, new opportunities. And that's about the point where I got a promotion and then ended up becoming eventually the SWAT commander. Um, with that came the responsibility of teaching everybody in our community about active shooter response, which at the time I was like, gosh, more work to do. And it wasn't something I really wanted to do, but we did it, and we did it so well that we were actually inundated and we couldn't handle the amount of requests we were getting. It was taking away from actually doing police work. So we had to make the decision to tell, smaller groups that we couldn't do it. And we really kind of stuck with just the hospitals and the schools and maybe some major companies, Motorola, DHL, American Express, things like that. And I saw an opportunity for a business at the same time. So we really felt bad. We felt like we had something, but we couldn't really, we just didn't have the timing for it. So this was a few years before my retirement. So I kind of like, this could be the opportunity that I'm looking for, my next thing. And worked out really well. I retired in February of 2020. Company was open in 2018. Our corporate clients suddenly disappeared when COVID hit. So I was like, well, that didn't work out really well, but it actually was good. It worked out very well for me because I finished my master's degree at that time. I put myself to good use at the time, and really started to dig deeper into violence and a lot of the stuff that goes on, especially in workplace. And I realized that, active shooter is a component of workplace violence, and why not kind of address the core issue, which is, why does violence occur? How do we prevent it? Because that's the one thing that we kept missing. We're like, why everyone's training an
Right.
active shooter, but they're exponentially increasing. Why is this not stopping? And it's because our focus really is on how do we respond. It's that reactionary response instead of a preventative. So our whole goal now has been purely, shouldn't say purely, but we're heavily focused on the prevention side of it. You still need to know what to do if it happens, because nothing is, there's nothing that's guaranteed. You can't guarantee you can show someone how to stop it. Human nature is just, it's going to happen sometimes. So we focus more on the prevention side and trying to get the word out, because what we're doing isn't working. And it like I said, it goes so much deeper. There's so many things that can be prevented. Bullying, sexual harassment, all these things fall under that. And there's so many things that are available that I don't think a lot of people know about or are willing to put the time and effort into, because we're so reactive these days. So that's
Well,
how I got
yeah.
short.
We are
That was a
reactive.
short, long answer. Excuse me.
No, I mean, you go longer if you want. It's
No.
because what you're talking about, the bullying and all of that, there's also, because I talk about moving beyond boxes so much, it's things that we don't talk about. So we basically, if we're getting bullied, if we're having this stuff happen to us, we basically crawl into a box and hide.
Hmm.
And the fear keeps us in that box. It's like, don't let anybody know, whether it's because they said something to us that we're fear for our life, or we don't want the stigma of what somebody's going to think, how they're going to now view us because we admitted to this. So that kind of fits so much with what I'm looking at, is getting people to move beyond these boxes and let this become a part of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't that help with that beginning point?
Yeah. I think that we've lost the empowerment, human spirit side of our lives in society these days. Everyone's afraid. So I always hear people are afraid. I'm like, the worst thing that's going to happen to you isn't what you think it's going to be. I mean, everyone's just worried about what if. Most of that stuff is so much wrapped up in your head and your subconscious that you're not living your life. And the problem, and exactly what you're saying, is, there's a pathway to violence, and the first thing is a grievance. And that's how all these things happen. Someone feels like there was something personally done wrong to them. They were bullied, didn't get the job promotion they wanted, any number of things. The government was bad, God
Right.
failed me, whatever it is. And they, like you said, it's a great way to phrase it, is you're going into a box and you're just sitting in that box and you're stewing in these feelings. Most people understand how to navigate that, but there is a segment of society that doesn't understand. They've never learned how to do it. They've never had a role model to show them. And so they start to it just festers. I equate it to boiling milk. If you've ever boiled milk to make hot chocolate or pudding, right? I'm a pudding guy, so, but
Oh, for me,
you
it's
put on
fudge.
it simmers, right? And if you don't watch it, it starts to you hear it. It starts getting louder, and then it starts to rise up, and it bubbles, and if before you know it, it explodes all over, and makes a huge mess, and you're in trouble because you got to clean it up. So that's how the pathway of violence works. It starts with that heat. You're putting that heat on a problem. That's the grievance. So someone feels they've been wrong, and then it goes to these violent ideations. Gosh, what could I do to get back at so and so, or how could I make them see me? And that's where these things come in. And our whole focus is, listen, it's so easy if you open your eyes to see someone who feels like they've got a grievance. It's so easy to see someone, especially in a workplace. You see them, they withdraw from their peers. They call out sick more. So absenteeism rise. Their work product is starting to fail. You start to see these issues. Why aren't we doing more instead of penalizing them? Hey, you're late all the time. Why aren't we seeing what the underlying issue is? Because that's really where it's at. If we start looking at that and try to pull them out, like you said, pull them out of that box, you'll
Right.
stop the violence. You'll stop that progression. It's like, again, think about the milk. If you don't want it to overflow out of the pan, you take it off the heat. That's the same thing. It's that intervention. Take it off the heat, have that conversation, but we don't do that. Again, same thing. Like you're saying, people are afraid. People are afraid to intervene. People are afraid to ask for help. It's this horrible cycle that we're in right now.
Yeah, and I think social media doesn't exactly help it,
Oh,
because
10 times worse. 10
that
times
and
worse.
that in politics, just watching the news right now, like it doesn't matter left or right. And
Exactly.
and when you're in those boxes, actually, we've got two different types of boxes that we're talking about, because there's the victims who they aren't the ones that are going to be that exploding milk,
Mhm.
but they're on the receiving end from these same people that are going to create the problem that will become the exploding milk,
Yeah.
because I know of some women who, um, one of them talked in a summit about a month ago, where she was a victim of sexual abuse, and this person was well known in the community, gave her, it's like, if you say anything, this is what's going to happen. She feared for her life. She feared for her life. But then here's where the stigma really went crazy. When she finally came out about it, she finally told people, and some believed, some didn't. And those who did, it's like, well, if you had sent something back then all these others who were also victims
Mhm.
wouldn't have.
Yeah.
But it's like, what do you do? It's like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I always teach and really try to get people to understand they need to empower themselves to speak up. And especially when you're talking about sexual abuse, um, it is a horrific crime. And if you've been, a victim of it, you understand that. And do you want someone else to go through that as well? And sometimes you have to put yourself out there, even making yourself more vulnerable by admitting what happened and getting the criticism of people who are not going to believe you. But if you just imagine if one person is saved because you were courageous enough to tell your story, isn't it worth it? I mean, isn't it worth
Yeah.
doing the one thing? Because I think if you were a victim of it, I think you would think, gosh, if someone had only spoken up and warned me, I might not be here. And if you think about it, and for those that don't have that courage, I understand that side too. I really do. It is not an easy task, especially when you're talking
No.
about sexual assault. Um, so I get it, but it's something that you have to make the personal decision to do. And again, I've in law enforcement have dealt with a lot of victims of sexual assault, and a lot of them don't want to they just want to report it, and they don't want to do anything. They're afraid. And I've had those conversations, and I get both sides of I totally understand. From law enforcement, we want to prosecute, we want to get these people off the streets, but we can't force someone that's not willing to do it. So it's very, very difficult. And in those cases, I think, how do you help anyone? there's a lot of you look. This is where I think social media is, has some benefits, is that there's groups online that have been through this. You can find groups, support groups. You can reach out and talk, and you're not going to feel so isolated, because sadly you're not the only person everyone's gone through something, and there's someone that you can relate to because of that. So yeah,
Well,
getting help.
and we all go through so many different traumas. I mean,
Yeah.
there's that, but there's verbal abuse,
Mhm.
there's emotional abuse.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know the ones that I've had to deal with for my whole life, and then there's I think one of the things that holds people back from telling their stories is the comparison of abuse.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I know this one too well, because just when you're ready to say something, you hear somebody else and it's like, "Oh, they're worse than me. Mine's not that bad." And then why talk? Why open?
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's no one's trauma is going to be worse than your trauma. If you have to realize that, I mean, it's even if it seems insignificant to you, it's not, and you have a right to share it, and you have a right to heal from it and get help, and um, But again, it just I somehow seems like we've lost a lot of emotional intelligence and the ability to handle and understand our emotions and deal with them. I honestly think social media was a huge part of that. I really do. We've lost the ability to communicate with people. Um, Compassion is just so much less, because it's easy to make fun of somebody online. It's easy, be the keyboard warrior, and you can, but in real life, when I grew up, you said something to somebody and they found out you're going to deal with it in a
Yeah.
much different level than on a keyboard. So it's tough. It's a tough situation that we're in these days, but I think it's something that we can navigate, you know?
And you're likely to know who it was. And
Yeah.
now people just make up a name,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
I think half of them are probably just doing it to see how much turmoil they can create
Yeah. Yeah.
when we don't need it.
No, no, but those are the weak people. Those are the people that are very weak minded and have, they're the ones that need more help than anybody else, honestly. But you aren't going to reach them, unfortunately.
But then I also wanted to kind of touch base, because we kind of talked earlier about that main article and some of the stuff, and I was telling you how when I went to drill, because for about a year I was the battalion information collection coordinator, or whatever they called it. It was big. I never knew what it really meant. It's just I was a first lieutenant. What did I
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But at the S2, the intelligence officer, he was trained at Huachuca. So it was great, because I got to hear some of the stuff that he learned and find myself putting it in play. And we've talked about this, and you've talked about it, of ways to keep yourself safe, things that you can do walking through the mall, walking through the parking lot, wherever you are, going into a restaurant, and finding that way to kind of take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially, really, I started getting inundated with questions, after what happened in Israel. How do we stay safe in an open area? How do we, it's all that, and then Maine happened, and then I was like, I've been very busy, but it's good. I'm glad people are starting to understand that they need to start paying attention. The first thing that I tell everyone is put your phone away. You don't need to be married to your phone and staring at it the whole time. If you go anywhere, just watch people. You're going to see 80-90% of them face down on their phone, walking around oblivious to what's going on around them. We've all seen peoples that have walked into doors, they've walked into water fountains, they because they're not paying attention. Those are great examples. People can target you and you wouldn't even have a clue. So put your phone away is the first thing. When you're out, I always say have at least 2 or 3 ways of an escape avenue. So if you're in a building, where are the exits? Where do you exit out of? Look for those kind of things. Um, and always, if again, you and I talked about this, is, if you're in a restaurant or a place where you're sitting down, if you can have your back to the entrance, or your back to the wall, and you're facing the entrance, or you see where people are coming and going, that's ideal. But if you can't, you can use reflections. I use it all the time. If there's a picture with a glass frame on it, I can see the reflection behind me, or a window, or there's a lot of places that have mirrors, or there's so many ways you can really see what's going on behind you without even looking. So
Yeah.
use those things to your advantage. You use what you have. Sometimes you can't always be facing the door. Sometimes you're with a group of people, or there's no tables available that are that way. So you want to do that. You want to be able to know and identify those threats before they actually take action. So you can, again, make that decision. Do I need to run or do I need to fight?
And I went through a lot of that a few years ago as we were getting through COVID, but when people were becoming more, being able to go out more,
Mhm.
even if we still had the masks, I would find myself just looking not so much through the windows, but using windows as a mirror in the mall to see what was going around me. I could see what was going behind me, what was happening,
Mhm.
because then you get some clues. You can see, are people actually looking at you, watching you, or are they just walking on their merrily way
Yeah.
on their
Yeah.
cell phones?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, and that's, it's we talk about when you're talking about situational awareness, wherever you're at, you're always looking for those anomalies. So you have a baseline of how normal people act. If you're in a restaurant, most people are talking as in a, with each other. Sometimes though, someone's going to walk in, they're going to start scanning the room. Well, that's kind of weird. I mean, sometimes you look, but some people have that very deep, intense stare. That's an anomaly. So you might want to watch that person a little bit and see what they are doing. Maybe they're just looking for somebody, or maybe they've got nefarious reasons for what they're planning. So
Right.
you always want to have those baselines and anomalies, and anybody is able to do this. It's not something that it's there's no it's you're not born with it. You can learn it. Now there are some levels we are born with, which is that intuitive nature. We've all had those situations where you've walked into an area and it just doesn't feel right. You feel something is weird. Um, that is biological. That's evolutionary. It's in our midbrain. The limbic system is designed to teach us these things and to warn us of a threat. And you might not know what it is. You might be looking around like, why do I feel so weird? But that's great. You should listen to your body when it's giving you those signs. If the hair's on the back of your neck, or you're getting goosebumps, all these things, these are I mean, it's biological. We know how to identify a threat, even if we're not sure what the threat is yet. And we should start listening to that, because a lot of times, especially in like an active shooter incident, or even in the main shooting, one of the guys at the bowling alley said he thought he heard a balloon pop, and he looked and he saw that it was actually someone with a gun, and he ran.
Uh-huh.
And that's what happens. A lot of these shootings, you'll hear people say, "Well, I thought I heard fireworks in the office." Well, when do you ever hear fireworks in an office? I mean, listen to you, but we're designed, we mute those that intuition, and we need to start getting back to that, where maybe I'm a little paranoid, but it's okay. A little healthy paranoia is okay, but it's more about being prepared and understanding how your body is, and that your body is trying to tell you something, and listen to it.
Being aware.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's a basic awareness, which
Mhm.
for some of us that's the first step.
Yeah.
You take that awareness. It's because too often we kind of know what we should do, but we don't always do it.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
when you can sit there and you take that awareness that says, okay, I need to do this. This is important. This is going to put whatever it is it's that I'm afraid of behind me, so I
Yeah,
can be complete. I can feel what's going on.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. It's interesting that, it's interesting how much technology has really muted that with us. It's like we were saying, the communication is lost. We're losing that ability to notice the weird things, because we're only looking, usually, well, now it's a lot of video, but years past online on social media, it was all photos. You're looking at Instagram and Facebook posts, and
Right.
you're looking at these kind of static images. And now it's a little bit more movement on these videos, but you're still only getting clips. You're only getting a segment of what's really going on. We see it on the news. Sometimes you see only part of what somebody is saying, and you're like, "That's horrible." And then you hear the whole thing. You're like, "Oh, that's not that bad. That's You missed part of that." Both
Yeah.
sides, both sides do it. So I'm not saying
Oh,
don't say anything.
I totally
Politics is
understand that
horrible.
one
Politics is
because
horrible, but that's what ends up happening. It's the same thing with social media, is that we start to buy into things so quickly without using critical thinking to say, is that a problem or is this not a problem? And I encourage everyone just to take some time away from technology. Shut your computers off for the weekend. nothing is that important. You having your phone off is it's not a big deal. You don't need to look at your social media and how many likes you got. It's in the scheme of things, it's not that important. You'll find that your stress level will probably go down. You'll be a little more relaxed, and you'll start to enjoy life a little bit more when you're not so worried about what's going on social media. So
Well, yeah, because the phone is really a distraction.
yeah,
And in this day and age, if people are going to listen to the news and start thinking that there's shooters all over the place, that's the first thing to do. That's like the first step of safety, security is put the phone down.
yeah. I mean, it's you brought up something that I'll mention is that there's so much division in our country right now, really across the world, but there's a lot of debate over shootings and things like that. And most of the statistics that are coming out now are so skewed one side or the other that neither of
Right.
them are correct. The reality is you being involved in a shooting is very, very low, especially in a school. But you hear more about the school ones because they're kids. I mean, it's such a horrific and unbelievable crime. So there's more, the news loves to show these. You get the most press out of these horrible incidents. So that especially when you're dealing with children, it's completely heartbreaking to see what happens. So, I think that you have to just take the information that you have at its surface level and just don't buy too much into it or not. And again, it's not about being, paranoid. If you look at the news, there's shootings every 10 seconds, it seems like. There's really not. I mean, there's always been criminals doing crimes with guns, and it always is that way. But when you start to kind of mix them in with the bigger topic of, well, is this an active shooter or not? And now you don't hear active shooter so much anymore. You hear mass shooting, and they're blending that
Right.
in there, and they're mixing up. These could be gang related. It could be, a robbery gone bad. It could be any number of things. It could be a domestic, that they went to workplace and they were, and it's there's just a lot of issues. And just, be prepared. Don't be paranoid, but understand that chances are you won't be involved. But if you are, have a plan.
Have that plan and know your surroundings,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
because that's probably the thing that gets most of us is, and that's the whole problem with these phones in the first place, is you don't get to know your surroundings if all you're looking at is what, a 3 by 5 screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
Exactly.
that's your whole world, then it's like you can only see so much peripherally
Mhm.
if you still have your peripheral vision even.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is that you're talking about peripheral vision. You can train that. You can train to start focusing on how far you can see, and at least you're aware of where your limitations are, where your blind spots are. If you think about it, most people, if you ask them, how was the drive into work today? They'll be like, I don't even remember it, because our bodies go into this relaxed mode, and you're on that autopilot, and you're like, I don't even know how I got here today. I don't remember driving to work today. But we do that. We all have, we're all pattern creatures of habit. We go to the same patterns, same way to work every day. We go to the same places to play or to work out or whatever, whatever we do for fun. We usually go to the same areas, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing in that you can be targeted because they know your timeline and your behaviors. It's a good thing because you actually know the area. You should know the areas better. You should know where the exits are. You should know where the vulnerabilities are in those areas if you're paying attention. So you have a better likelihood of success, of survival, if you understand what those areas are and how to get out of them if you need to. And you know the baseline too. You know what looks normal, what doesn't.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to this as well though, because you've been involved with a number of those active shooter situations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just from your side of it, what what was that like? How are you dealing with the situation as well as the people around it?
So from a law enforcement standpoint, it's incredibly challenging. And law enforcement tactics change, the response changes. It's always getting improved. Unfortunately, every agency isn't the same, every area isn't, every state isn't the same. So there's no generally accepted practice overall of how to respond to them. We know what works really well right now, but again, when the good guys figure something out, the bad guys are in, the bad guys will change it to something else. So we start to, and we're seeing that now. We're seeing that more of these attacks are happening outside of a location than inside of a location, because inside is being more protected. So there's new tactics that have to be designed for that. But um, you know, Fort Lauderdale airport shooting was a complete um, it was chaos. It was absolute chaos despite the training and the planning that goes into these things. It is too dynamic. And, in this circumstance, we kept getting false reports. There were, I don't know, 6 false reports, maybe. I don't remember the exact number, but numerous of different areas where there were shots being fired. And it was people that were just so afraid that if they heard a loud noise, they would say it's a gunshot and they would call that in. So you're talking, it's a big airport, you're talking about all these different teams and trying
Oh,
to
yeah.
clear the area. It was very chaotic, and by the time we realized everything was going on, you're hours into it. So from a law enforcement perspective, very difficult. Everybody's a suspect, so you don't know, because you don't know. You have to look at somebody. Are they holding anything in their hands? In that case, there was luggage left everywhere, like all over the place. We had to do one of the things we had to do was the parking garage. And you're just, every time you saw a luggage, was that a bomb? We had to get somebody from a bomb squad to come out there to test it and get a dog to go by it. And it's very, very chaotic. And I think that law enforcement has their work cut out for them when responding. When you're having to bypass victims that are either deceased or dying or injured, uh, it's very, very difficult. The number one priority is to stop the killing. The second is to stop the bleeding. So, and that's one of the things that changed. Over the years, it was, you know, we would just bypass everyone, not worried about anybody. Now we've got to develop skills where we're going to be providing training, getting rescue in there, while at the same time searching for and trying to eliminate the threat. So it's things just evolve over time, but it's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to be part of. And I'm happy to see there's been a lot of good response lately. We're not always successful, but it's getting better.
Yeah, well, and as you talk about how the response keeps changing and growing, how hard is it to how hard is it to basically go through that transition process of learning something new, and maybe what was the requirement a few years ago is now something totally different.
Well, if
You're
we
ingrained one way.
yeah, well, I'll go all the way back to '99 after Columbine. Columbine, it was law enforcement's belief that you don't go, you wait for a SWAT team to come in and handle it, and meantime everyone's getting killed. Um, to me, it's outrageous. To me, I'm like, I can't believe that's what and I was a police officer then. You know, and I was like, why aren't we? Why? But I hadn't really thought about it. I hadn't really thought, well, like it was even though active shooters have been around for since
Forever.
the early 1900s. They've had incidents, you know, but how do you respond? It was so infrequent that you didn't really know much about it. So that was the first time we're like, listen, we got to go and we can't wait. But as that went on, what do we do? What do we do? And we see these victims that are bleeding out, and not from fatal wounds, just from blood loss because they're not being treated. And that changed. And there's a lot that goes into how do we address that. Um, any police we want to help people. The object is to save people, help people. It's always been that, and especially it's to get the bad guy and to stop people from becoming victims. That's always been there. So the learning something new isn't necessarily the obstacle. The obstacle is how do we do it and what's the best course of action, because you don't really know what's going to work. Sometimes you have to see if it's going to work. So the good thing is that over the years, there's been a lot of multi-agency training. So agencies, different police departments, with the inclusion of rescue and fire departments, has really made things much better. We trained a lot with our rescue department. The problem came in was their policies didn't match up with our policies, and how do we get them involved, and how do we do this? And they were like, well, we don't have the equipment, and it just, so there's money that gets involved, and how do we fund them so they're protected? And it's a lot more complex than a lot of people think. We had such a great relationship with our rescue department that to this day I still talk to a lot of the guys that are on there and friends with them, and um, it's always evolving. It's always well, okay, well, that's not going to work, and usually figure that out in training. You have to do live training, very difficult, time consuming. Again, money, because you're pulling people usually in for overtime to do this
Right.
training. So a lot of agencies can't afford to always do it as frequently as they want, but that's the best thing that you can do, and everyone's usually really for that. But you get into disagreements. Well, that's not the best way to do it because their policy might say they can't do that. And we're like, well, you have to do that because we need to do this, and so you have to find a way to work together. So it's really about communication. It's about trying to not let egos get in the way, and just because that's what it is. I mean, you being in the
It,
military, you know what I'm talking about.
oh yeah, and then you
A
talk
lot of
about it.
alpha people that are like, no, me, no, me. Yeah. So you just got to kind of be humble and say, all right, how do we collectively make this work? Because just like with anything, it's really hard to be successful alone. You have to be working with people to get the holistic and perfect response, if there is such a thing.
Oh yeah, and with a lot of that, you've got too many leaders and not enough willing to just sit back and make sure things get done. It's like, no, my way, no, my way.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's always the
And,
challenge.
it just and the problem is too, half the time, and I've seen it in the military, all these senior officers will say, "This is what the plan is. This is what we should do," and it's that sergeant who's got way more experience
Yeah,
than any of them officers.
yeah,
It's just kind of going, because I loved it. I'd have some of these sergeants. They just look at me and go, "Lieutenant, these guys are effed up." It's like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is what we should do. We should do this. We should do this. And, and when I was in, because that was mid '80s
Hmm.
to 2000, there are still a lot of Vietnam vets
Yeah.
that were in the service.
Hmm.
I looked at the senior commanders within the brigade and the battalion and the squadron. They're all walking around with, I can't remember which arm it is now, but they've got the combat patch on.
Yeah, yeah,
So they're walking around with two patches on, the current unit and the combat
yeah,
patch. And you just look at them and go, dang.
yeah, yeah,
And just watch them as to how they're doing. So it's, you got to find the people that have that experience, that knowledge,
yeah.
and don't worry where their rank is.
Yeah, I think good leadership understands that it's not always about giving the command; it's about getting completing the mission successfully, and that means going to people who know and utilizing their experience and their training to direct the way to get. There's a million. The old saying, "There's a million ways to skin a cat." Just because you think your way is the right way doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. Someone might have a better alternative, and there's one of my favorites is Jocko Willink talking about leadership, and they talk about decentralized command, and that's something that I put in place with my team was, allowing my team leaders to make the decisions, and I might ask questions. Well, why did you do this? And they tell me, okay, and that was it. Now I had my failings. There were times that I jumped out of my when I probably shouldn't have, but they would always remind me, and I'm like, okay, good point, and we get through it. But understanding that when you're at a higher level, and I don't want to pick on people that are in higher levels that don't have the
No, no.
experience. A lot of times that they're looking at it from a different perspective, so they don't see the same things. Just like when you're at a lower perspective, you don't see their. So that's, again, it's a communication thing. Why do you need it this way? How do we find a way to work together? Can we go this route instead? Usually the communication, if you start talking to, if it's somebody above you, if you usually start expressing your concerns in a respectful way and say this is why, and justify your case, usually they'll listen. um,
Yeah.
Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they won't listen, and you just have to deal with it that way as well. But it's a challenge. No matter, any leadership position is a challenge. It really is. But I agree. There's a lot of, usually the people at the bottom are forgotten when decisions are made, and they're not used as a resource when they should be.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. And when we talk about security, I mean, I can only imagine if you were to look at a building for security and just probably figure out who's the best person to take you around that building.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
probably not the CEO.
No, probably like the custodian, you know? It's
Yeah,
probably someone that d like a maintenance worker that knows that building backwards and forwards, and, like, when we do, like, a threat assessment of building, I usually seek out those people because I'm like, "So, what's the problem?" "Well, there's this lock that's broken on this door." I keep telling they don't wanna budget to fix it, and I'm like, "Huh, there you go." They'll tell you what's wrong, it's great, you know? And they might have been saying it for a long time, but they don't either they've just given up or they're not getting to the right people that will hear them. Um, so you just got to be open minded when you're dealing with a lot of these things, and um, it's just a challenge. It's security is always a challenge. It's always a challenge because of exactly that. You look at healthcare. A lot of the administrators. Aren't exactly seeing what the nurses and doctors in the emergency rooms are going through. They don't see how bad it really is, because they're just seeing some reports here and there. They see things that
right.
are happening, but they don't think it's that bad. Go down there, go work a shift, see what it's really like for these people, and you'll understand how bad it is.
Well, and I like that analogy because to use that, and I think everybody can picture that, the doctors, the nurses, what they're going through versus the paperwork.
Hmm.
And I can see that analogy works so well with security too.
Yeah,
It's finding the people that you need, putting the reports together, and um, I mean, in terms of your services,
hmm
what all do you provide when somebody says, "Okay, I need help." Maybe they don't quite know what that help is, but they just know that you're the person to talk to.
Yeah, so it's usually a lengthy conversation with me asking a ton of questions, because a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people will
Right,
come in saying, "We want this," and I'll say, "Okay, well, have you experienced this?" "Well, no, we just think," and I'm like, "Okay," and then we start kind of peeling back the layers, and they realize that there's probably more issues than they realize they didn't realize that they had. So it's a lot of questioning. It's really about understanding what that organization what their biggest threat is, and how we can eliminate it. Sometimes it's through training, sometimes it's through changing the physical environment. We do a lot of stuff using septed, which is crime prevention through environmental design, where we will position things in a way where it decreases the likelihood of a crime occurring there. An
mhm,
example would be, a side door that people go out, there's a parking lot and the car's getting broken into a lot of times. Put a picnic table out there, make that an area where you can go to have your lunch outside. Now you've got people that are there. Criminals don't want to get caught. Now there's people that are
right.
coming and going out of that spot. They're not going to be seen. They're going to be seen. So you'll reduce crime that way. So that's what we use, those kind of things for. But it's, online training. We pretty much will do anything. Depending on what their exact needs are. Sometimes it's very simple solutions. Sometimes it's a very complex solution, from rewriting policies to retraining security teams on how and what to look for.
Well, and I like that. Just the simple ideas
Yeah,
that can really make a difference on security.
yeah,
Having that table out there,
yeah.
making sure there's a covered spot for it so people can go out when it's raining or
Mhm.
snowing or whatever.
Yeah, 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 exactly, and that's what we use if you're familiar with the phrase Achman's razor, Achman was back, I think it was in the 1400s, and he was a philosopher, mathematician, and all kinds of stuff. And he basically came up with this principle that the simple solution is usually the right solution. And he would say, if you hear hoofbeats, it's horses, not zebras. And we kind of keep things simple. I mean, you don't have to make things so complex that people are like, I don't even want to deal with it. You have to make it palatable for somebody. So security, where people feel like, oh, there's so much, it costs so much, doesn't always cost. Sometimes it's simply just fixing a lock or putting a convex mirror in a hallway so now there's no blind spot there. I mean, some things aren't as expensive as others, and but until you start asking the questions and peeling back those layers of what the real issues are, you'll never know. And putting your head in the sand doesn't do you any good either. So you have to start addressing these things, especially in this world where it is getting more dangerous, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it's again, it's not as it's compared to other countries, we're very safe still, you know?
No, and I think across the board, so many industries that probably could learn from this alone.
Sure.
Simple ideas can make such a big difference and make a huge impact that nobody's thinking, because they're only thinking dollars and what are they going to spend, and they'll never know until they sit down and talk to you, and you can go, well, if you just do XYZ, you
Yeah.
might spend a few $100s, but
Yeah. Well, even, we have to do a lot of, we have to start looking not just what it's going to cost to implement a security plan, but what it's going to save you as well. Because when these things
right,
happen, it can be devastating financially. For some small organizations will never recover from an active shooter event. Lawsuits and all that kind of stuff. Insurance costs will go up. There's all kinds of problems that will start to happen. Bad publicity. Why didn't you protect your employees? And we have to start looking at that, and there's numbers there's numbers there, and it even comes down to personnel. I mean, we're talking about, I mentioned healthcare earlier. There's a shortage of healthcare workers, but it's not because that they're not there. It's they're leaving because one of the biggest reasons is safety. It's not salary, it's safety. They don't feel safe in their jobs. And when you look at an employee who's not feeling safe and engaged, you're looking at like higher absenteeism rates, you're looking at higher turnover rates, you're looking at lower productivity, you're looking at the chance that they're probably going to start to do things to retaliate against the business, whether it's sabotaging equipment or stealing. So there's cost to all these things. Keeping your employees engaged and happy and safe is invaluable. And you can even turn them in the other savings that we have that I always illustrate it with one example. We did a threat assessment of a government research building in Orlando, and it was a small building, and I didn't really know what to expect. I went there, and I was probably a half hour early. If you've ever been to Orlando, Florida, I-4 is like the worst traffic ever. So you go really early. So we're standing in the parking lot, and somebody, one of the employees, walks up and says, "Can we help you?" I'm like, "No, we're good." He says, "Well, it's a private company. What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, we have a meeting with," and I gave the name of the security officer. He's like, "Okay, I'll let him know you're here." I said, "Yeah, we're like a half hour early." And he goes inside. 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by, another employee, totally different. "Hey, you guys need help? What are you guys doing out here?" And we kept getting, then finally a custodian comes out. He's taking trash out, puts trash away, comes over to us. Now we're about 5 minutes before. He's like, let me bring you guys in there. That's what a good security plan is empowering the employees themselves be part of the solution to keep everyone safe. And that was such a great example of what you can do. And that means that you're saving money. You're saving money on security personnel because your employees are security personnel. So
right,
there's a lot that, if you're looking so myopically at just what it's going to cost, you're missing the savings that you're getting. The profitability goes up because of those savings.
right.
Yeah.
And I love it too, because we almost talk about two different types of security when looking at a workplace, because I'm looking at the individual in terms of them themselves,
Yeah.
so that they're not covering things and hiding because they're afraid of what others will say.
Hmm.
But you're taking another aspect of safety. So these both really tie in together for
They do.
retention of physically feeling safe. And physically can be partly what I talk about, but everything you talk about, it really is that physical, is everybody watching out for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It builds community. And again, the key to all of that is leadership, being in support of it, and being involved in it as well. But yeah, it really is. It's security is on many different levels. It really is. So definitely.
And I love that. Oh, here we go. I knew she'd pop up with something.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, she's there. I mean, she's telling us we're not smiling enough, and she's yelling because she's got no voice anymore.
That's right. She should be resting. Let's see. Use business to help employees stay safe at work. So, you know, the first thing an employee has to feel that they have the ability to report an issue, and that can't be downplayed. So if there's a concern that an employee has about, that back door isn't locking properly, or the parking lot's really dark at night because the lights aren't there, or trees have overgrown into the lights and we can't see, and now we're scared. Instead of blowing that off, an employer can address those concerns quickly.
Right.
If it's something that might take a longer solution, find a temporary solution to help during that time. Um, as far as healthcare, boy, that's a big one. Because that's where, when you're talking about workplace violence, 75% of all workplace violence occurs in healthcare. So it's a huge, huge, huge problem. And there's so many things that can be done, but it really comes down to taking it seriously, as an employer, understanding that what's going on in healthcare is an epidemic, and it's having just long range effects. And you don't think it doesn't impact anybody, except if you're in the business. But I'll tell you a personal story. My father was in the hospital about a month ago. He had some internal bleeding, and my mom takes him to the hospital, and they got his blood pressure to regulate, and he seemed to be okay. And they're doing tests and waiting and everything. And all of a sudden his blood pressure drops, and they hadn't seen a nurse in like 4.5, 5 hours. And my mom was so angry. And and she was, mom's smart. She got up and got somebody, and he ended up having to have surgery, and he's fine now. But, she was really angry. And I said, you can't blame the nurses. She said, well, they weren't checking. I said, well, the nurses now have too many patients. They can't devote the time because they're so short staffed. And it's going to impact you if you go to a hospital. If you, it's, all the wait times and all the stuff. Our healthcare system is a little bit in shambles right now, because the way that they're addressing this problem could be a lot better, but it's going to impact everybody. So, starting to listen to the workers themselves, and not try to downplay what's really going on. I've interviewed probably over 1,500, healthcare workers at this point in the last 2 years. It's the same story. They feel that they've got too much on their plate, that the chance of them making a mistake has increased because they can't handle the amount of patients that they're dealing with. They're not getting training that's working. They believe that administration doesn't care, which I don't agree with. I think administration does care. They're just not. They're in disbelief about how bad the problem is. So yeah, I mean, there's so much that can be done. I could talk for hours on healthcare.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
CJ can ask questions for
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, I know. Security guards at every level of the hospital. Yeah, I mean, security guard, but one of the problems that I always hear is that the quality of security guard, you're talking about very elderly or very out of shape people. And, you know, there's a study that the FBI does on law enforcement that are killed or assaulted, and they interview the offenders, and they ask, why did you pick this officer to attack or kill? And they found a lot of things that were similar, and it applies to how criminals target their victims. And they look for people who are unkempt, overweight. They don't look like they can fight, but the ones that have a crisp, clean uniform and are squared away, they won't mess with them, because they know these are probably the ones that I'm going to be able to, are going to fight. So I'm going to go for the weakest of the weakest. And so a lot of these hospitals, they're hiring these security guards that are elderly or obese, or, they're not going to do anything. And a lot of them actually even aren't allowed to do anything other than report it to the police, which is fine. But they also are not really trained in what to look for, and they're not paying attention. They're just filling a role as, I'm a security guard. They don't really do anything. So
Right.
there's a lot of problems in
Yeah.
healthcare.
In Oregon, I know during the pandemic, they were putting they had the National Guard at the entrances to many of the hospitals around here. So they became that extra layer of, because they didn't have anybody else. There was nobody else to hire.
Yeah.
So the governor's like, okay, here's the guard. We'll put them in. And because I remember going to the ER a couple of times, and that was it. You had to make sure your mask was on, and you passed 2 soldiers before you could even get into the ER.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some hospitals have no security at all. I mean, and I always, anytime I have to go to the hospital, I always try to probe a little bit and see what I can get away with, innocently. And sometimes, I went to my another time my dad was in the hospital, and my mom was up there, and I went to the desk, and I said where I'm going, and they said, oh, well, she's got somebody up there, and I go, no, she left already. And they go, okay, here's the pass, because they only wanted one person at a time. My mom was up there, my sister was up. I laugh about that. I'm like, I'm harmless, but that just goes to show that, it's tough. The security guards have a tough role because it's also a customer service position as well. And they don't want to make anyone
True.
upset. And especially in a hospital where family members are worried, concerned, and upset, it's a crisis situation for them. So emotions are high, and it's challenging. But again, that comes down to training, and it comes down to their ability and what the overall security plan is.
Yeah. Well, I can see we're getting close to that hour mark.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been great talking with you, and there's so much here, and I'm gonna throw this one out just because she told me. CJ said to mention English Bulldog.
Yes. Yeah. So she's got bulldogs. I had a bulldog is my favorite. Actually, you can see in the background right there. I got a little bulldog statue. So yeah, I'm a big bulldog lover. So
Well, yeah, and she'll call me, and it's like I can hear the snoring,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
she'll
There's a lot of sounds that bulldogs make that are pretty funny. So
well, I had a Boston Terrier, so she had her
there you
own
go. Yep.
noises. And
Yep.
it's like I miss her. I'm not sure I'd want the bulldog, but
They are the greatest. They are just, I mean, they're just the biggest wimps. They're just they look like they're tough, and they can be, but they're just little babies. They really are. It's hilarious because they look tough.
I'm not sure CJ agrees, but I'll leave
Well,
that to her.
well, they're crazy, but they're lovers. They really are.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yeah, this was kind of her last.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely comes down to a lot of the policy and training. And again, and you have to have leadership that's behind it and is in full support of it. So definitely. Yeah.
So as we kind of close out, and it's been great having you, and I'm glad for everybody that's been here and this opportunity, whether they watch it live or they watch it in Memorex. It's like
Yeah.
I can still say that
Okay.
because
Some
I
might
grew
not
up
know what
with
that
this.
means. Yeah.
It's like I grew up in the 70s, so I remember those very
Yep.
well.
Yep.
But yeah, if it's team replay, if it's live, um, so much that you provided here, so many nuggets, and I love what you talked about, and just giving even the basics for personal protection out and about.
Yep.
And not just the put your phone down. That may
Yeah.
be the most important, but
Yeah. That's the low hanging fruit. That's the easy one.
yeah, that's the easy one. But it's like there's more to it, and you provided that more.
Yeah.
So as we kind of get to the end of this, I just wanted to let you kind of have the last word. Any comments, golden nuggets, thoughts that you want to leave as kind of that parting gift?
Yeah. I think that it's important for people to start to realize that, we use the phrase first responder quite frequently, but in reality, police and rescue are not the first responder. You're the first responder. You're involved in an incident. You are the first, you're the one that's at ground zero. And you need to understand how to protect yourself. You need to understand how to have a plan. I'm not saying that go get weapons and, if you're not into that, that's okay. I'm for that, but if you're not, that's okay too. Have a plan, know what you're going to do, and start to pay attention to your surroundings, because it's going to take time for police to get to you. It's going to take time for rescue to get to you. So if you want to take a class on first aid, CPR, stop the bleed training, all those things, they're usually free programs that you can get. I mean, that's invaluable, and it translates to all areas of your life. If someone gets hurt while you're at your kid's soccer game, or there's so many things that you can help somebody with, and I'll tell you, there's no better feeling than helping somebody like that. It's you make a big difference, and I think everyone has the ability to do that. So understand that you are the one that has to be responsible for your protection first, and then wait for someone else to get to help you.
And that's great. That is the truth. Nobody really thinks about whoever's there. First responders really aren't. They're second and third responders.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It's whoever's there, boots on the ground.
Yep.
Time, that's your first responder.
Yeah.
So I can see CJ looks like she wants to make a whole bunch of phone calls once she gets her.
Good luck, CJ.
Well, I mean, she's saying let's, so she's expecting
Yeah,
you to make the calls too, but
I do call a lot of hospitals. Good old
but it
CJ.
it's been great having you on. I'm
Absolutely.
glad this talk, because I mean, we didn't really get to talk before today.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Uh,
exactly. No, I
I saw
appreciate
you
it.
during the summit, and CJ
Yeah,
commented about the summit.
yeah, that was a
Um,
great time too.
and outside of that, this is our first conversation. So, and
It
I
is.
loved it.
Me
It's
too.
been great talking with you. I love your personality and how you just are just right there with the ideas, the comments. What a great flow. So
I appreciate that.
thank you so much for coming on and being here. I loved it.
Thank you so much.
And as for everybody else in the audience, thank you all for being here. I'm glad you showed up. And now we've come to the end. So thank you. And I will see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.